So I've shared with you that the theme for this month is Ancient Wisdom, Modern Lives. I've been in Unity since the mid to late 1970s. You might say I grew up in Unity, and I've read the Bible numerous times and have heard the parables and proverbs and stories in it many times. And one of the things that I realize is no matter how many times I hear some of these stories, they're fresh and new to me. And there was a period when I found that to be kind of odd. You know, why when I know this parable, does it seem so different to me this time than it did the last time I heard that parable or read that parable? And then eventually I came to understand that the reason it seemed so different is because I was different. And the circumstances of my life were different. I might have been dealing with a completely different set of opportunities or challenges. And so the lens through which I saw the parable, the ears through which I heard the parable were different. And therefore, what I was able to take from it was different. If you're familiar with the parables, if you're familiar with some of Jesus' teachings, you're probably also familiar with the fact that he used parable and story a lot to teach. And one of the things about parables and about stories is that we tend to remember them. And if we remember the story, we're more likely to remember the teaching contained in the story. And that's why I think Jesus and other great teachers of old and current use stories to reach us, to help teach us, and to leave us with something that we can remember and call upon when we need it most. The ancient teachings and timeless wisdom apply to us today, whether we're talking about proverbs or parables or other tools that we'll be looking at throughout this month. And I think they're particularly relevant for us when we're dealing with things that are challenging us personally, or when we're looking at the world and maybe we're really concerned about what we are seeing and hearing and reading about. And so I'm going to share with you 3 of my favorite parables this morning, and I'll try to unpack them for you. They are the parables of the Good Samaritan, the parable of the lost sheep, and the parable of the prodigal son. Raise your hand if you are familiar with any of those. Let me see. Okay, great. That means that most of us probably grew up in some sort of Christian tradition where at least we had some familiarity with some of these. So the first, the parable of the Good Samaritan. You know, even people who are not well-versed in the Bible, if you ask them, have they ever heard of the phrase Good Samaritan? I bet you're going to find that the answer is yes, Good Samaritan. So a bit of context here. So a lawyer is testing Jesus and asking him, what does he, the lawyer, need to do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus answers him and says to him, love God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself. Well, remember now, the context is this is a lawyer. And lawyers then are similar to lawyers today, and they're going to drill down and ask deeper questions and maybe even ask questions that challenge. And so the lawyer says, well, who is my neighbor? Who is my neighbor? And then Jesus gives a parable. And paraphrasing, the parable goes like this. A man traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho is attacked by robbers and left for dead. A priest passes by and does nothing. A Levite passes by and does nothing, despite seeing this person left half dead. A Samaritan, who's often despised by the Jews, Samaritan notices and takes action, bandages up the wounds of this traveler, takes him to an inn where he can be cared for, says to the innkeeper, take care of him, And whatever the cost is, I will come back and I will pay you for that. And of course, then Jesus asked the lawyer, so who was the neighbor? Who was the greatest? The one who did and paid attention and took notice of the one who was hurting, the one who was left for dead. What is Jesus trying to say to us here in terms of relationships? When I worked in Silent Unity, which is Unity's 24-hour prayer ministry that's been in existence for well over 100 years now, there were two prayer requests that were the most common. And they were either for physical healing or for relationships. For relationships. We struggle, many of us struggle with our relationships. And yet within our spiritual practice and teachings are the tools to handle our relationships better, more effectively, and to grow in the process as we handle them better and more effectively. And so what is Jesus trying to point to in this parable? What is he trying to say about eternal life, about this idea of the wellspring of life and vitality? He's saying that it has to do with our relationships. It has to do with how we care for one another, right? How we care for one another. In the parable, he's painting a picture and he's suggesting that compassion needs to rise above. Compassion sees beyond prejudice. Compassion is not prejudice. Compassion is extended regardless of race, ethnicity, sexual orientation. When we are living in the realm of compassion in our relationships, it is to be unconditional. So he's pointing to the importance of compassion over limit, compassion over prejudice, pointing to and emphasizing love as an action. We grow, I think, in leaps and bounds in our understanding of relationship when we realize that love is a verb, not just a noun. And if you think about it, the times that we are probably most challenged in our relationships, especially relationships of love, is when we have forgotten that and when we are focusing more on love as a noun. The tendency is when we are focusing on love as a noun is we are aware of either what we are receiving or what is missing. When we are focusing and understand and see love as a verb, we recognize it as an action, right? It is something we are to extend, something we are to do. It is a way to be. And have you noticed that love in action doesn't always come at a convenient time? Have you noticed that when you are called upon or life presents you with an opportunity to act in a compassionate way, to be a force for love in action, that it probably wasn't on your calendar? Right? It probably wasn't on your calendar. It was something that happened and your mind, your heart took notice and you chose to act. Loving your neighbor requires that kind of action, that kind of willingness to extend oneself. It's the second part of our mission statement, really, in action. You've heard me say this numerous times, that the New Thought movement has finally matured and evolved to not just be about personal transformation, as important and necessary as that is, to not just be about us healing our own traumas and our own wounds, as necessary and important as that is, but to then do what? To extend that beyond ourselves to healing our world with love. That's not just a nice pie in the sky, oh, let's just say these pretty words. It's a call to action. It's a call to love in action. Love as a force more than as an emotion. And generosity. Think of the Samaritan who stopped what he was doing, took care of this wounded man, didn't leave him by the roadside, but then brought him to an inn where he could be further cared for and offered to pay for that. Generosity is first a matter of the heart before it is a matter of the pocketbook. Take that in for a moment. It's so easy to think of generosity first as the pocketbook. True generosity is first a matter of the heart, and then it may extend into opening up the pocketbook. And sometimes it has to involve opening up the pocketbook. But first, it is a matter of the heart. I came across this story that's kind of like a little bit of a modern day parable. It claims to have been in New York City in the railroad station. And if you've ever taken any of the trains or the subways in New York, you know it's hectic going through those turnstiles. And it's just a little story of a woman who actually had an extra subway ticket, and this was like early in the morning, commuter time, and she used hers to get through her line, and then she had the extra ticket. And she decided that she would wait instead of boarding the train right away and offer her spare ticket to anyone who needed it. And many of the people just passed her by suspicious, like, no, there must be some catch. And then finally, an older gentleman accepted her gift and was just beaming, was very happy, and then he went onto the train, she went onto the train, and one of the people who had been watching this on the train as the doors were closing said, "Why did you spend so much time waiting to give that ticket to that man?" She said, "It wasn't about the man, it was about my call to be loving. It was about my call to be in service. It was about my call to be generous." To be generous. I think about, the story of the Good Samaritan. So much of the focus is on the Good Samaritan, right? That's why we call it the Good Samaritan, right? But I wonder, what did he actually experience? He helped the individual, right? The individual was blessed. The individual received care. But what was the gift that the Good Samaritan received? You know what that gift is. I know you know what that gift is, because anytime you have extended yourself, when maybe it was inconvenient or maybe you thought you didn't have enough, but you extended yourself, how did you feel when you did that? You can talk to me, it's okay. How did you feel when you did that? You felt good, right? You felt good. I'll tell you, this happened to me just a couple of weeks ago when I was at Unity Village for the Unity World Headquarters board meetings. And so my flight was super delayed, and I didn't get in and into the hotel at the village until 2 o'clock in the morning, and our board meeting started at 8 o'clock in the morning. And when I started to get myself ready, I looked and I thought, oh my gosh, I don't have enough contact solution to last me for the several days that I'm here. So I texted one of the other board members and said, hey, you said if I needed something, you would help. Do you have any contact solution? And if you have it, could you bring it to the meetings this morning? She said, she takes it back, I don't wear contacts, but what do you need? I said, oh, don't worry, I don't want to inconvenience you. Maybe I'll have enough to get by. And this is what she said to me. I'll get them for you. What brand? Don't be blocking my blessing, girl. I will never forget. Her name is Reverend Sandra Campbell. She is the associate minister at Unity on the Temple in Kansas City. Thank you, Sandra. Don't be messing with my blessing, girl. It's like she understands that what happens when we just put ourselves there to give, right? To give. So, parable of the Good Samaritan. The second, the parable of the lost sheep. That's one that maybe is not as familiar to people as, say, the Good Samaritan is, but is another one of Jesus' great parables. And he says, suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Now remember, we're talking about a time when sheep represented wealth. So these sheep to the shepherd represented his portfolio or her portfolio. Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. Then he calls his friends and neighbors together and says, "Rejoice with me, I have found my lost sheep." What is the significance of that in regard to our relationships? What does it mean to leave the 99 behind, to go care for that one sheep? The shepherd's action to that one sheep reveals how he regards the 99. The way that he goes to find that one sheep reveals how he regards the 99. When we reach out and care for the individual in front of us, it is revealing how we care about the all of us. Does that make sense? I think about teachers, and I think about some of the teachers that I have known in this community that are remarkable in their compassion and their dedication to helping children learn and grow. Whether we're talking about teachers of young children or teachers of middle schoolers or high schoolers, I can't tell you how many teachers I have known who will drop everything to make sure that they care for that one child that is somehow struggling. They will try to figure out what it is that's going on in that child's life or what that child needs in order to be reached so that then he or she can be taught. And to the extent that they are reaching out to that one, they are communicating in volumes how they regard every other student in that class. They're saying, "You are all important to me. You're not just a mass. You are each individuals, and you matter to me." This is a kind of world I think we want to create. Am I right? Where we really do care about each other. You know that question, am I my brother's keeper? No, you're not your brother's keeper. You are your brother. That takes with it a greater moral and social and spiritual responsibility. The actions we take to help the one speak volumes with regard to how we feel about the majority. The last parable that I want to share with you is the parable of the prodigal son. This is one that's probably almost as familiar as the parable of the Good Samaritan. At least I think it might be. And it goes like this. The father demonstrates unconditional love and acceptance for his wayward sons. The father is a wealthy man, has 2 sons, and one of the sons decides that he wants the inheritance now. And so the father gives him the inheritance, and then that son takes that inheritance and goes off and has a really good time. Spends it all and winds up spending it all and winds up living in really difficult situations and decides to come home. Wakes up, realizes what he has done, realizes his wayward ways. And so as this prodigal son comes home, starts to come home, the parable is that the father sees the son and rushes out to meet the son, doesn't wait for the son to come back to the house, but runs out to meet the son physically, emotionally, we could say, mentally, to reach the son, and celebrates that his son has come home. It's so easy to be upset, right? It's so easy to go, what about the son that stayed home and played by the rules? He was probably firstborn, right? That's usually the way that kind of goes. be interesting if it's a parable, so we don't know, but kind of interesting the way that could go. It's easy to look at the one that stayed home and go, well, how come, Dad's given the attention to the one that took all the money and went and spent it in a foolish way and is ashamed and embarrassed, but is coming home wanting to be accepted. I think what Jesus is trying to convey in this parable is a really powerful, important teaching, and is the teaching to meet people where they are. To meet people where they are. Think about that for a moment. Just in the visual, right, of the Father going to the Son. How do you think the Father might have felt? Probably had complex feelings. I would imagine that he might have been kind of upset. I know I would have been. But I also know I would have been very happy to see my son come home. To meet people where they're at. This is so important. This is important in terms of what we're going through in our world today, especially in our country where we're so divided. To meet people where they're at. Even before where we are today, shortly after the murder of George Floyd, when our work at the Unity Center in racism and anti-racism really went much deeper, I remember learning something from Dr. David Campt. In his training, we had brought him here to help us understand, particularly as white people, to understand the issue of racism. And really core to his teaching was to meet people where they're at. And so whether it was somebody a white person who just believed, well, racism was solved, with a long time ago. We don't have that anymore. Or we could apply it today politically to how we might not understand someone whose political point of view is so very, very different than our own. Part of Dr. Camp's teaching or practice was this idea that you have to meet people where they're at. And one of the ways, he didn't use those words, but one of the ways that he taught us to meet people where they're at was to try to understand their story, their personal story, not their opinions. And he invited us to step into the idea of, well, how did you come to see things the way that you do? Stop with that for just a moment. Think about that. Think about someone or something that is so very different from you in the way that you see the world or the way that you see things. So different that you could get really angry and upset with them. Any of you have any of that going on in any part of your life? And it's so easy to dig our heels in, right? And to not be like the father of the prodigal son and go out and meet them where they're at. Is this making sense? The idea of meeting a person where they're at is not to hold judgment, but to try to understand, how did you come to think the way that you think? How did you come to feel the way that you feel? If we are really willing to sincerely ask that kind of question and authentically listen to the response, we might find that we share a lot more in common than we thought we did. And we might find the energy of anger or division really starts to come down a bit. We might still wind up disagreeing, but we will probably not be as disagreeable with each other in our disagreement. Does that make sense? So I think like in this parable of the prodigal son, this powerful visual of the father going out to meet his son where he was and to celebrate that he had come home, that was a significant step forward. That was a step forward of acknowledging mistakes made in the hopes, perhaps, of being understood and accepted. Jesus' teachings, his parables, to me, his parables and the Beatitudes are the richest part of his teaching. And it bothers me so much that who and what I think he attempted to do has been hijacked by the religious right. There is so much wisdom from him, and there's wisdom from others to be certain, but so much wisdom in these teachings that are as applicable today as they were when he first shared them. So I don't know which of the parables might have hit you deepest or more insightfully, but I hope that there's an idea or two that you go, you know what, I can work with this. You know what, I can work more with the idea of love as a verb and love as an action, and I'm going to be more like the Good Samaritan. I'm going to keep my eyes open. I'm not going to let people keep my blessing from me. I'm going to make sure if there's an opportunity to give, I'm going to give. Or I'm going to really recognize the worth of each and every person, because how I look at the one reveals how I care about our human family. Or I'm going to really step into meeting that difficult person in my life, that sandpaper to my soul person in my life. I'm going to try a little bit harder to meet them where they're at. I think if we do any one of those things, we are going to grow for sure, because it takes humility and effort to do any one of the things I've just shared. So we're going to grow, but I think we're also going to find that our relationships begin to improve. Namaste.